Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today I'm joined by Twan, Tom and Issam, and we have a lot to talk about because in this midweek episode we are going to discuss the Superprestige in Niel, which was held on a new parcours. So first of all, I would like to know from Tom, Twan and Issam what they think about the new parcours, because I personally quite liked it.
Well, I thought it was a really great track today. A bit more of an old school parkour, as we'd say. I thought, first muddy race of the season, and it had some nice steep banks, technical corners, as well as some straights, some road sections. So some really good variety. And I was a big fan of the section off the start as well, a big steep downhill into a muddy running section. Probably the most interesting course so far this season, and it was some really great racing today.
I think the parkours helped a lot with the amazing racing that we saw today. It was very nice to see some mud on the course already, even though apparently it was quite a nice week down there. It was a lot of fun to watch. I'm not sure how much the downhill helps. I really think that in the first lap and the second lap you could see that there was a little bit of a traffic jam at the top. I guess that's also part of such courses, and it's kind of fun to see as well. People are able to return after one lap.
Yeah, it was also a very complete parkour, so that was also very nice to see that there was some mud going on. You had some running sections, there were hills, and also some sand. So it was very complete, and it brought back a little bit of nostalgia of the old days.
Yeah, I agree on that. I liked it as well. It was a pretty long parcours, pretty hard to remember as well looking at it, but I enjoyed it and it should be here to stay. I think Erwin Vervekke did a good job putting out this parcours there, and it certainly delivered because the men's race was super interesting. Issam, tell us a bit about what happened in that race, because it was a real nail biter.
Yeah, it was. The Hermans duo, Van Kessel and Hermans, were the ones who were leading the 70 people who started at the men's race into the field. In that descent, of course, where we're talking about that you have to go through, and then you have to pick your time to get off your bike and run the run section, because there was no riding there. At that descent, it was Van der Haar who was checking out if the mud was soft enough to land on, and took a dive and lost out quite a lot of time. Iserbyt missed out on his start completely and was outside of the top 10 for, I guess, the opening round, and had to make a comeback. That was not really the start the European champion was hoping for. We had the sand section where we were talking about in the beginning, the Sweeck section, to be honest, because he was the one who was dominating that section, and actually got a gap from his teammate Ryan Kamp. It was Quinton Hermanns that chased a little bit in the following round, but in the end it was Iserbyt, his own teammate, who chased him down and came back to his wheel, but then had to change his bike. Lost some 4 or 5 seconds, and Twan Aerts was able to come back on the wheel of Iserbyt. Iserbyt looked at Aerts and said, I cannot chase now. And Aerts knew what the situation was, tried to chase Sweeck down, and he was able to do that. And then Aerts was in a dilemma, because then he had 2 guys of Paul Sousen where he's going, he has to finish that race with, and it seemed to be a battle between these 3, with a lot of tactics going on and trying to get in front of the other. But unfortunately, in the penultimate lap, it was Aerts that got a puncture front flat tire, and he was out of that battle. And then we only had 2 left, with Iserbyt and Sweeck, both teammates. For Iserbyt, it would have been nice if he could win that race, the leader of the Paul Sousa formation. For Sweeck, it was his ultimate opportunity to win a race. Iserbyt tried at the beginning of the last lap, trying to force something, didn't work out. Then Sweeck took over, and Sweeck didn't let that lead go away from him. He was dominating in the last part of the sections, and also in the sand, bridged the gap, and he was gone. So then in the end, it was Laurens Sweeck who took the victory in the third race of the Superprestige in the Jaarmarkt in Niel.
Well, you already mentioned it. Probably the main point of the race was the moment that Aerts punctured, a real anticlimax, because Aerts rode a super strong race. He looked to have learned from the mistakes that he made in the previous races. He didn't start too hard for once. He got himself into a rhythm. Eventually closed the gap to Sweeck after 20-25 minutes of racing. It definitely costed him some energy, but he really looked to have the upper hand. He was pushing hard, making sure that Van Toerenhout wouldn't come back, because against 3 Powell Sousa guys he would have been out of contention probably. But then he punctures. I think he would have won without the puncture. What do you guys think?
I think Sweeck was on one of those days where a lot is possible, and certainly he is able to contest the win. Aerts definitely did ride a stronger race tactically than he has in the past few weeks, and I think this is something that we can applaud him for. Still some, well, not all too smart decisions, I think. On the second to last lap, they went on to the final straight, and he was pushing all the way, but then you have to take the right turn, and he backed off too much, which meant that both Iserbyt and Sweeck could get around him and first into the field. I'm not sure he would have won. Definitely could have been possible, but don't want to take too much away from Sweeck. This was a superb victory.
I would say to add on that Twan was very strong, and he rode a very good race. I think he learned his lesson from the European Championships. He was trying to pace himself towards those guys, and he did a actually superb job. And I really wanted to see what would have happened if he didn't puncture, because I think he might had a chance to win that race, to be honest, because he's known for a very good last lap, and he looked very strong in that race, in my opinion.
Indeed, and you could see in the last lap, after he'd had his puncture, he seemed to be closing in on Sweeck and Iserbyt. Even when they were battling out for the win, he was still closing them down. So I definitely think he could have been in contention for the win today.
Yes, he indeed closed that gap from 20 seconds to 12 seconds whilst they were going full out, and what would have made his chance even better is that Iserbyt was doing some strange things today. I mean, I couldn't really get my head around what he was doing, and Issam, you said something during the race as well, that Iserbyt was doing strange things. I don't think he rode the smartest race, did he?
Well, I mean, not. I wouldn't say only the smartest race, but it was also especially from a team where he got a lot of victories out of team tactics. They helped him a lot through this year and last year, and to chase your own teammate down while you could actually give him 20, 25, 30 seconds and a permanent victory at that point, then to chase him down, that was. Yeah, it was so not. It was not a classy move, I would say, and Sweeck is fortunate enough that he had something left in the tank and able to win that race. But if he wouldn't have won that race, I would blame Iserbyt on that, because there is no point in chasing your own teammate. I mean, you saw Ryan Kamp, making that gap. That's how a teammate should work for another teammate, and not try to chase your teammate down because you want to win that race.
And especially considering that when I was looking at the beginning, I thought that Sweeck was gone. Actually, Aerts, he didn't make a strong impression to me in the beginning. I thought he was struggling a bit, maybe mentally as well. But then Iserbyt started to chase, and all of a sudden it looked like Aerts got hope and momentum back. He thought, hey, the gap was big. We closed it. It's halfway down. Then he got dropped by Iserbyt. Iserbyt then was in the view of Sweeck, and then made a strange decision to swap bikes at that point when it wasn't really needed. He then not only lost the contact to Sweeck, he fell back into the group of Aerts, and even then, when in the beginning of that he was still pulling with Aerts in his wheel, and I don't think that was smart to do. And he looked to be struggling throughout the stand section every lap, and it was pretty strange as well, because there were sections on the parkers where he lost a lot of time, and then in other parts, all of a sudden, he could come back.
Yeah, I agree on that. And if I am another coach, another trainer like Christoph Roodhoofd or Bart Wellens, I would be on the phone tonight with Laurens Sweeck, because it's not. Don't forget, it's not the first time that he is being chased by his own teammates, and he's probably now going to think maybe I should switch to another team and just be there the sole leader. I mean, now it went good, but let's say he lost his race. What then? What is the point of having teammates at that point? Maybe you should then switch the team.
I also think it's just it's Iserbyt not wanting to ride for the team, and I think this hurts himself as well, because the next time Sweeck goes up the road, Aerts is just going to sit on his wheel and he's just going to laugh in his face and he's going to be like, yeah, but in Niel you chased him down, so you're going to do it again, because apparently you can't stand not winning or not being in the fight, not even like not being allowed to give it your all. So he has also taken away the advantage that he had of having the teammate for basically the rest of the season, because if you're going to do this in Niel, you're going to do this in pretty much every classification cross, every championship. You're not going to let a teammate right away anymore, apparently. But I think this really hurt Iserbyt more than just today, and that's not a good thing.
Indeed, and although obviously it's an individual event, the teams have played a big part in recent years in lacrosse. Paul's Selsom themselves have actually shown in previous years with Iserbyt and Michael van Toornhout, but they've been able to challenge Van der Poel through the use of some team tactics. But if Iserbyt's to lose his faith in his teammates, then I think you really, to challenge Van der Poel and Van Aert when they begin racing again, the teams are going to have to work together really well. So we'll see how it turns out with Sweeck and Iserbyt in the coming races.
Let's take a look at the complete top 10 then. It was Twan Aerts who finished third, because we already said Sweeck won in front of Iserbyt. Twan Aerts in third, Lars van der Haar finished in fourth. We find Courtney van Kessel in fifth place. Then we see Michael van Toornhout, Quinton Hermans and Ryan Kamp. Ninth place, Daan Soete, and 10th place for Niels van de Putte. Let's talk about Lars van der Haar briefly. Fourth place after he crashed in the opening stages of the race. Pretty good comeback ride, wasn't it?
A very good and mature race from him. It's not really a race that suits him a lot, considering his height and his running ability. But he managed pretty well, and he was very far away, especially in the first lap. But he made a pretty good comeback, and to be fourth in the end, I mean, just fair play and a very good race, I guess.
And then Twan and Tom, somebody else who also rode a good race. That is actually it's two guys. Both from Herremons, Quinton Hermans and Courtney van Kessel. They look to be improving their form week after week. Both had their issues. Probably van Kessel took a bit of a rest after his long road season. And Hermans, of course, we all know that he crashed in the Criterium du Dauphiné. Do you guys think that... I mean, it's a good sign, but do you guys think that they will be able to make some more steps in the upcoming weeks?
Indeed. Well, we all know Hermanns is the real fast starter. And we saw both the Hermans duo of Hermanns and Van Kessel in the front of the race in the opening lap. That's always a good sign, Cyclocross is really about the start, makes a big difference in the race. So if they're able to be in the front from the start, hopefully they can build on it and keep in the front for the remaining laps. It's much easier to stay at the head of a race rather than have a slow start and work your way forwards. So perhaps when we see Van der Poel and Van Aert back in the field, if these are the only two who can hold them in the first lap, you could see Hermanns and Van Kessel being drawn away from the rest of the field. And yeah, we could see them taking the podiums in the future, maybe.
Yeah, I think for Van Kessel, this is basically his second good result of the season. Not been all too amazing, just riding around consistently. Especially disappointing last Sunday, I would feel, in the European Championships. I certainly hope he can build on this. As for Quinton Hermans, he has been steadily building on it. After the first few crosses where he totally blew up, he has certainly found his rhythm a lot more, and it looks very promising.
Someone else that looks promising is Ryan Kamp. We've said it week after week, the brand new under-23 European champion, finishing 8th today. And I mean, week after week he's putting in these solid performances, and this guy is super talented, and the same goes for Niels van de Putte, who ended 10th today. these are definitely two names that we should keep an eye on in the future, because they're doing basically the same as what Iserbyt did when he first started riding against the pros, and we all see where Iserbyt is now, and I think we could be in for some great battles in the future.
I think it's very good for those guys. You know, they're both only 20 years old. It's very good for them to do those hour races, to get those races under your belt, to try to, it will make you a little bit harder. It will make you a little bit better overall. And this is the push they need to be able to challenge an Iserbyt or a Sweeck in the next following years.
I must say I haven't quite found Niels van der Putten that as impressive as I have Ryan Kamp this year. I think Van der Putten, we saw him take a really quick start in the Koppenberg cross, but then we saw him quickly sliding back, which was very disappointing in my opinion. And Ryan Kamp just been up there when he has, like, he rides very consistent races, and that is something that is just amazing to see. The guy has only finished outside the top 10 once this season, and that was in the Superprestige in Ruddervoorde, and it certainly promises a lot.
Indeed, I think Van der Putten was really suited by the course today. He's a really strong technical rider. I think Van der Putten has the upper hand from camp on the technical sections. And in the opening few laps, I saw Van der Putten riding the really steep bank on the course when many other riders were running. He was able to ride past them and move up quite high in the race. And yeah, I think the course suited him well today. So it'll be interesting how he plays out. If he can improve his physical side on the courses like the Koppenberg to be really competing with camp.
And it sucks for those guys that the Dutch and Belgian Federation announced that they won't be sending any youth teams to the upcoming World Cups because of the regulations that their countries have set in, and that means for them that they really miss the competition between the under-23s, and it's a shame because then they never really get to compare themselves with the people who are in the same age as them on a clean field, because now there's obviously a big difference between in the UCI rankings, so they will be further apart in the field with lots of others in between them, so it's really hard for them to compare. And in this case, Kamp and Van der Putten will keep getting a bigger advantage over the rest because they have the better starting position, which means they have better starts, which means they are further in front of the field, which means they probably get a better result, which results in more UCI points, moving them further up the starting grid, and it will just continue like that for them. For them, it's probably also a big mental hit because people like Thibaut Nys and in a less extent some others like Thomas Main, Bakkert, Arne Vrachte, these guys, they really need that competition to even get themselves inside of the teams to get a contract for next year. And I really hope for them that there will be some kind of solution so that they at least have some sort of racing where they can show themselves. Then let's talk about the women's race, because we already mentioned the men's race was super exciting and entertaining. Well, the women's race certainly delivered as well. Twan, tell us.
It was a nice start, a bit of a traffic jam at the top. It was the usual 5 Dutch women that were off the front. They were also joined by Manon Bakker, who rode very solidly. And as we went into the second lap, everything kind of bunched up together at the top of that downhill. Not everyone being able to take as much speed into it. And unfortunately, it was Vorst who had a very weird crash and unfortunately had a mechanical as well. And that cost her a lot of time, losing contact with that front group of 5 women containing Alvarado, Betsema, Brandt, Bakker and Kastelein. These went on and slowly it became clear that Bakker and Kastelein couldn't quite keep up. I believe that Bakker had a mechanical and the other 3 went on to the final lap where Brandt basically had to come back for a little bit just before then, and she managed to do so and rode a very strong last lap with Alvarado and Betsema on her wheel. And it was Brandt that went into the finishing straight first. She launched a very powerful sprint. Alvarado had to come the long way around, but she couldn't quite do it. It was Brandt who won in front of Alvarado and then Denise Betsema.
So it was certainly an entertaining battle there at the front between those three women. I wasn't able to watch the entire race because I was still at school, but I watched the final part and it was certainly entertaining. And they looked to be really matching each other. Nobody really stood out above the rest. So is it fair to say in the end that Brandt was the strongest today?
Brandt looked really strong, and I think winning that sprint was also because she was able to get into that first position. Alvarado would also know to get into that first position, so I think that indeed the strongest person won today.
It is also a very hard race, so it's I mean, she was very strong. I think Alvarado didn't play that smart, especially not being first going into the sand section. She admitted itself, but she said she couldn't do anything better than that because she was just on the limit. But yeah, in this race particularly, I think Brandt was definitely the strongest, and it suits her. It seems the running and also going with the mud. She was very strong.
Indeed, yes, I think I agree with you. It was a head-to-head sprint, and she came out on top. So, especially a bit of a catch-up in the last lap. I think you can definitely say strongest rider today was Lucinda Brandt.
She took her second win of the season today, and somebody else who also rode a good race, Annemarie Vorst, after that crash, really giving it her everything to still come back to the front, ending 5th in the end, just behind Kastelein, but in front of Bakker and Kant. Do you think she could have done more without that crash? Or, well, obviously she would have done more, but what more would she have done?
I think challenge for victory, to be honest. I don't think she would do less good than Brandt and Alvarado. She isn't that strong in the running section, so I mean that would be her downside. But she has a lot of power, and her technique is not that bad either. So yeah, she would have definitely played for the podium.
Indeed, I think she would have been there in the sprint, but we've seen Alvarado has had the edge on Vorst in the last few head-to-head sprints, so I don't think it would have affected the end result today unless she had been able to distance herself in the last lap from Brandon Alvarado.
Well, it was a really tricky last straight as well, coming out of the field with this uphill, then the corner. Alvarado looked to have a bit of overspeed, but they needed to take the outside of that corner, and then simply just there wasn't enough space left for her, especially because it went up those extra meters. That cost her momentum, and it was a bit of a strange finish if you really look at it, with the uphill section just before. It's not your typical cyclocross sprint just on a flat road coming out of the field. It's really something atypical.
It's one of those races where positioning is key. That if you go through the last corner first, then normally you would get the victory. And it showed today that if you go through the first corner, if you go through the last corner first, then you will eventually win the race in the last lap. So, but it was a nice finish, to be honest. I really liked it with that corner. I think the legs will be completely lactating at that point, and you're just full of adrenaline going to that finish line trying to overtake, but it wasn't enough for Alvarado this time.
Let's take a look at the entire top 10 then. It was Lucinda Brandt who won in front of Alvarado and Betsema. In 4th place we find Jara Kastelein. In 5th it was Annemarie Vorst. In 6th place we find Sanne Kant, 7th Manon Bakker, who indeed had a puncture in the beginning of the race. Catablanca Vaz in 8th. Then we have Verdonschot in 9th, and in 10th place is Fem van Empel. So the first name that's in this top 10 that I would like to talk about still is Annemarie Vorst, who basically rode an identical race to Van der Haar, crashing early on in the race, being a bit further behind, and then riding a strong comeback.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty positive race for her, apart than from lap 1, I guess, because nobody wants to have such a lap 1. I think her chain fell off as well. Struggled a little bit, tried to get back. She had some help from Arzoufi, but in the end she had to do it all alone. And then she had some company with Kant, by the way, who did actually a pretty good race. Seems to be on the way back, or at least on some way, because it didn't look good the last few weeks. And now, day by day it comes, and maybe we can see Kant as well fighting for some top fives in the next few races.
Well, I think this is the most cont parkours we're going to see for maybe quite a while. Of course, there will be a few races where she does better, but usually this would have been one of those races where she would have been in the front group. And, well, quite frankly, she isn't quite there. Of course, we shouldn't forget that Vorst already won the Koppenberg Cross. And I certainly think that there will be crosses where she will be winning again. It will, of course, be tough with Alvarado there and Brandt as well. And then even Denise Betsema. The top of the field is just quite big. And that is really lovely to see.
Well, it looks positive, I would say. The course suited her today, probably, but only 42 seconds off the win. 6th place. She was first time back in the top
Tom,
10.
what do you think about Kant? Do you think
in the
that
Superprestige.
she's on the right track at
a few
this time?
races, she's been outside of the top 10 and quite a way off the pace. So I think it's promising. And 7th in the European Champs, I think. So hopefully she can build on her performances, I guess.
Then two other interesting names in the top 10 were the names of Vos and Van Empel, and we talk about these young riders all the time on the podcast, but it's really nice to see them, and I think Vos, especially Vos, because she came from the mountain bike, and then this is her, I think, 3rd or 4th race of the season, and then again ending in the top 10.
She's shown herself really strong physically and technically with the skills from a mountain bike background. I think we can just see her building over years.
Yeah, go on, Tom.
Yeah, I think she's going to be the next one competing with the Dutch, I reckon.
I think with Vos as well is that she's very strong. She has the technique. She knows how to ride. There are just some small things that, very easy things like shouldering your bike, going off your bike, going on your bike. Those simple things where she loses sometimes a second, 2 seconds. It's detail. It's very small, but it's sometimes very crucial in the race. And I think if she works on that and really gets the cyclocross, really knows how to be able to do all those things in the cyclocross, then I definitely think that she would be a force that would be able to challenge those Dutch riders for top 5.
And I think that what you're saying is correct, and I think it's easy to explain. I don't think she's been doing cyclocross super long. She's from Hungary. It's not really the country where you think, well, there's going to be cyclocross races every weekend where she can compete in. And I think that it's just, the more she does it, the more she seems to get used to it. And I think that definitely those are things she can make progress in. I don't know if she's in the right team to do that, because she rides for Proximus. I know that Jurgen Mettepenningen is kind of taking care of her, which is good.
It's amazing to have someone in the sport that's not from Belgium, not from the Netherlands, not even another bigger-ish cyclocross country for example, the Czech Republic. This is just someone that's from a country where, like you said, there won't be racing every week, and it's just so amazing to see someone from such a country like that be able to compete with, well, some of the very best in the world, already coming 8th today, just riding like Ryan Kamp very consistently, very well.
Anyway, with that, I think we've discussed everything. I would like to thank Twan, Tom and Issam for joining me today and giving us their expertise on the race in Niel.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks.
And like Tom said earlier, we will be discussing the ETIAS Cross in Leuven, which will be taking place this Saturday. If you're wondering where to watch it, make sure to check cyclocrosssocial.com or follow Cyclocross on Instagram, and we will be joining you again at the beginning of next week to talk about the ETIAS Cross in Leuven. Goodbye.